What happened to one of the most powerful ancient relics of our time? Did it vanish? Was it hidden? Or does it still exist today? Let's find out in today's episode of The Inexplicable. Hello and welcome back to The Inexplicable podcast, the only place in the known universe where leaving with more questions than answers means you're heading in the right direction. So, it's been a while, I know. I've had a few personal things come up, but nonetheless, I'm back with a really nice episode. And this one, as you can tell by the title, is the Ark of the Covenant. But it's something that I've kind of vacillated on for a while, and I think anyone who's into theology or biblical stuff and stories like that, this is quite a main part of a lot of those stories. So I think this is going to be a good one. I'm excited, and I was excited to do kind of a deep dig on this. So I hope you find this interesting too. So, without further ado, let's get into it. This is the disappearance of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is a sacred chest described in the Bible that held the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments given to Moses. It was made of gold-covered wood with a lid topped by two golden cherubim. And the cherubim, if you don't know, are usually depicted as like these sort of naked babies with wings. They can be like humans as well, not just babies. Sorry, they can be adults, not just babies, but usually they're babies. But I believe on the Ark, they're kind of like a human, angel, bird type morph. You've probably seen them. The Ark symbolized God's presence with the Israelites and was kept in the holiest part of the temple in Jerusalem. But its location has been unknown since ancient times. Now, the Ark's actual physical appearance, like I said, was made of wood and gold. So it was made of an acacia wood, one of the most durable desert hardwoods you can find. It was completely overlaid with pure gold, both inside and outside, and that was one of the commandments to build it, that it had to be made out of pure gold, or covered at least in pure gold. And it was surrounded by a decorative gold moulding, so like an ornamental border sort of thing. If you pull up a picture of it, you'll be able to see what I mean. Now, the size of the Ark, it was about 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Now, if you're probably thinking, what on earth is a cubit? That's exactly what I was thinking, because cubits are kind of a redundant measurement in today's day and age. But a cubit, one single cubit, is roughly 18 inches or 45 centimeters. So in today's world, the Ark would measure about 3 foot 9 inches long, so 1.1 meters long, 2 foot 3, which is 0.7 meters wide, and then 2 foot 3, 0.7 meters high. So not the biggest thing. So you imagine just basically like a meter by a meter and a meter high. So it's like a smallish kind of object. According to the Bible anyway. The Ark also came with these things called carrying poles, and there was two of them. So these poles were made out of the same wood that the Ark itself was made out of, and these were also covered in gold. And they ran through the 4 gold rings that were attached to the Ark's feet and corners. So if you look at a picture of the Ark, you can see that at each corner there's these like loops where the carrying poles were meant to go through. And the poles were never meant to be removed, ensuring the Ark was always carried without being touched directly, because touching it was considered deadly. So these poles were kind of the medium in between you and the Ark, so you could touch these poles without directly touching the Ark. What else was on the Ark was something called the cover, or the mercy seat, or sometimes known as the atonement cover. This was actually the Ark's lid. I believe in Hebrew it's something like the kaporet, You can correct me if I'm mistaken on that. This was also made entirely of solid gold. So whereas the ark and the poles were made out of a wood with gold plating, this was made out of solid gold. So you can imagine it was very, very expensive and very valuable even in that day and age. And then on top of the lid, like I mentioned in the intro, were the two golden cherubim, which are like these angelic bird sort of figures. And they face each other with their wings outstretched upwards. The wings of the cherubim overshadowed the mercy seat, forming a kind of throne or resting place, I suppose. Now, the mercy seat is said to represent God's throne on earth, where his presence would appear in a cloud above the cherubim. So, what was actually inside the ark? For such a protected box or container made out of solid gold, you'd expect something quite important to be stored inside. So, there's a few different things according to various different passages within biblical scripture. Number one, and this is probably the most prominent one and the most widely accepted, these are the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments given to Moses. You can find this passage in Exodus 25:16. So these are the tablets that the Ten Commandments were written on when Moses received revelation from God at Mount Sinai. The next item, potentially, that was in the ark was Aaron's rod that budded. You can find this passage in Numbers 17:10. So this is the rod that Aaron had, Aaron and the brother of Moses. His rod was supposedly also in the ark. And the last thing that I can see that I've researched is the golden jar of manna. This can be found in Hebrews 9:4. This is more of a Jewish tradition. And so these are the three main things that I've been able to kind of see that are not confirmed but quite widely accepted to be in the ark. There are a few other little things but they're more fringe and kind of conspiratorial, so I don't really want to mention them. Saying that, however, later references in 1 Kings 8:9 mention only the stone tablets being inside when Solomon placed the ark in the temple. So when Solomon obviously had the ark and put it in the temple, Kings refers to the ark as only containing the tablets. So that kind of does debate the fact that Aaron's rod was potentially in there and the golden jar of manna. Not to say that they weren't put in later potentially, or they just failed to mention it. But it does beg the question. Not that it's too important, but it is something to note. So, what was the purpose of the ark? Now, in the Bible, the ark has kind of a practical purpose and a spiritual power, serving as the central symbol of God's presence among the Israelites. So, like I said, it has a few different purposes. Number one, it was a sacred container. Like I mentioned, it held the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, which represented God's covenant with Israel. Now, a covenant is just like an agreement, basically. So his agreement with the Israelites. It was essentially the physical reminder of God's law and promises. So the ark for the Israelites reminded them of their promise with God and to always be mindful of that wherever they moved through the land. The second purpose of the ark was God's throne on earth. The ark was seen as the earthly dwelling place of God's presence. The golden cover, like I mentioned, the mercy seat with the cherubim symbolized God's throne, and God was believed to sit enthroned above the cherubim, and you can read about that in 1 Samuel 4:4. So, like I said, they believe that his presence was a cloud above the cherubim. So yeah, take from that what you will. The third purpose was that it was a center of worship for the Israelites. Placed in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred room of the tabernacle, and later Solomon's temple. So this was the thing. This was the thing that everyone admired, that looked up to, looked forward to, looked towards. And as such, it was placed in in the holiest room in the temple. And not only that, only the high priest could approach it, and only once a year on Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And what the high priest would do was he would sprinkle a bit of blood on the mercy seat for forgiveness of sins. Now, I couldn't really find what blood this was, if this was his own blood, or it was like some sort of sacrificial blood, like someone had to donate it. So I'm not sure on that. But either way, I mean, it's a little strange. But yeah, blood was spilled on the mercy seat for forgiveness. And one of the last purposes was for guidance and protection. So I've kind of mentioned this. When the Israelites travelled through the wilderness, the ark was carried before them, symbolising God leading them. And this gave them, I can imagine, a feeling of confidence, and they could move with conviction because they had God on their side, or so they believed. In battle, the ark was taken as a sign of God's power. So you've got stuff like when the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, the ark was with them. When the walls of Jericho fell, if you're not familiar with that story, that's basically when the Israelites crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Their first major obstacle was the city of Jericho, which was a walled fortress. And then God commanded Joshua to have the army march around the city once per day for 6 days. Leading this were the 7 priests carrying trumpets and the Ark of the Covenant carried by the Levites. On the 7th day, they circled Jericho 7 times. After the priests blew their trumpets and the people shouted, the mighty walls of Jericho collapsed. The Israelites rushed in and captured the city. Now, obviously, the Ark was given a lot of credit for this, and you know what? Rightfully so. If that's what they feel like, help them do that. And I mean, look, the walls of a fortress just collapsing is some feat, and that has to mean something. So overall, I think you can get the idea. You get the sort of feeling that the ark was the holiest of holy things. You know, it was revered in between the Israelites and even by their enemies. You know what? Their enemies of the Israelites actually feared the ark as well. So, I mean, because it was literally seen as God's presence on earth, and his seat, if his presence did come to earth, his seat would be on the ark. So you can see why they admired it so much. And just overall, it kind of just served as like a reminder to them of that God was on their side and of their covenant with God, and to always keep that in their mind. So it makes sense. So now that we've talked about kind of what the ark is, what it looked like, and what it meant to the Israelites, now we get on to the interesting part of it, which is the ark's disappearance. The disappearance of the Ark of the Covenant is one of history's great mysteries. The Bible gives no final record of what happened to it after the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 BCE, when the king destroyed Solomon's temple. After that, the Ark is never mentioned again in any scripture. Now, as you can imagine, there are plenty of theories as to what happened to the Ark, some more feasible than others, but nonetheless, I'll go into the leading ones now, and I'll let you guys make your minds up as to what you think happened to the Ark. So, the first theory is that it was hidden in Jerusalem, either under the Temple Mount or in Jeremiah's cave. So, if we look at the source for this is the book of 2 Maccabees, verse 2, 4 to 8, which is a Jewish historical text that's not actually in the Hebrew Bible, but it is also included in some Christian traditions. This says that the prophet Jeremiah, who was guided by God, took the ark, the tabernacle, and the altar of incense, and hid them in a cave on Mount Nebo, which is east of modern-day Jordan. He declared it would remain hidden until God gathers his people again, and then it would be revealed. The other traditions suggest it was hidden somewhere underneath Solomon's temple, sealed away in a secret chamber built for safeguarding sacred items. Now, modern archaeologists and religious groups often claim this theory. Digging, however, is restricted because the site is one of the most politically sensitive religious places in the world. However, it does beg the question. The Temple Mount, which is currently Al-Aqsa Mosque, is a highly contested area with Israel carrying out excavations around the compound, and the Islamic Authority claiming that the digging is leading underneath the mosque, breaching the custodial law, because the custody of the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound is not actually with Israel. It's with, I believe, a foreign authority, which has, I believe, Jordan are involved with that. So they obviously believe that if they're digging underneath, then it's a breach of law. There is speculation that the digging they're doing is for the Ark of the Covenant and they're looking to find it. Now, that's not concrete, and there's a lot of conspiracies out there regarding that. But, I mean, if we look at it objectively, it would make sense if the Ark was so special to the Jewish people, if they think it's under Solomon's Temple or the Al-Aqsa Mosque now, it would make sense for them to go and look for it. So it's quite feasible, to be honest. Right, number 2. It was taken to Babylon. So in 586 BCE, the king at the time destroyed the temple and carried the treasures to Babylon. Biblical accounts, 2 Kings 25:13 and Jeremiah 52:17, list the items taken: gold vessel, the basins, lampstands, but they do not mention the ark. So as you can imagine, this silence has fueled debate. Some argue it was looted and melted down. But if it did go to Babylon, it may have been lost when Babylon itself fell to Persia in 539 BCE. So it's definitely interesting. It would make sense for the king to take the ark because it was so valuable. So if he took it and it was somewhere in Babylon, and when Babylon fell, the ark disappeared with it, it would make sense. It's just a bit strange how it's not in the accounts in Kings and in Jeremiah in the Bible when the other things are mentioned. So it's an interesting one. I don't know how much meat that one has, but it's definitely one to consider. Number 3. This is a very, very interesting one. So this is that it was taken to Ethiopia, and this is a big theory in Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity. So the claim is that the ark was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I, which is the son of King Solomon and Queen Sheba, centuries before Jerusalem was destroyed. So this kind of goes against the whole narrative. But hear me out. According to the Kebra Nagast, which is Ethiopia's national epic, Menelik visited Solomon, and when he returned to Ethiopia, he took the ark with him, either with Solomon's blessing or secretly. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church believes the ark still resides in Aksum, in the Church of Our Lady, Mary of Zion. A single guardian monk is entrusted with watching it, and no outsiders are allowed to see it, making verification impossible. The scholars debate that Ethiopia may instead hold a replica, since many Ethiopian churches have copies of the ark, called the Tabot. So it would make sense that potentially they also might hold a replica, which they believe is the authentic one. But the likelihood of it actually being authentic, I don't know how plausible that is. However, something strange is going on in Ethiopia, because I was reading somewhere that the people that guard the ark, or the so-called ark, in Ethiopia, all of the monks seem to develop cataracts in their eyes and suffer from very, very high levels of radiation. Now, that is strange, given the fact that, they're in a church. What could possibly cause that amount of radiation, and what would cause them to all develop severe cataracts? It points to some sort of high-level light force with high levels of radiation. That would kind of be in line with the ark's power. Now, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying they definitely have it, but I am saying there are some questions to be asked. Why are these people developing cataracts? Why do they suffer from high radiation? What is actually causing that, if not the ark? So it's definitely something. It's definitely a fun one. You can do some more reading on that. There's a lot of stuff out there on that. But in my head, I've always kind of thought, like, if the governments of the world, the intelligence agencies of the world, really believed that the ark was there, surely they would send special forces teams in to just go and take it. countries have done way worse for way less. If the Ark of the Covenant is really here, surely the Americans or someone would send special forces in to go and retrieve it. That's just my kind of thinking anyway. Right, number 4. This is the theory that it was hidden in Egypt. This is the elephantine theory. So, some traditions claim the Ark was taken to Egypt during times of political turmoil. One version says it was carried by Jewish priests fleeing Jerusalem and brought it to Tanis, a city in the Nile Delta. This actually inspired the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie storyline with Indiana Jones. If you've watched that movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, definitely give it a watch. It's a classic. Another theory connects it with the Jewish community on Elephantine Island, which is in southern Egypt, which actually had its own temple in the 6th century BC. So some speculate they actually safeguard the Ark there. Now, saying all that, this is merely speculation because as far as I know, there's no direct archaeological evidence linking the Ark to Egypt. So it's kind of more hearsay and myths and stories passed down. One of the next theories, if I'm going through these a little bit fast, feel free to just go back and listen to them again. And I always encourage you to see my theory, hear it, and then go do your own research because I might be wrong on some of these details. I'm just trying to figure this out for myself. So feel free to do your own digging, and I actually encourage you to. So the 5th theory, the Ark was destroyed or lost forever. Some historians believe the Ark was simply destroyed during the Babylonian invasion, burned, dismantled, or just stripped of its gold. And then obviously if it was stripped of its gold, it would just be left with a wooden box. So this kind of is similar to the Babylonian theory, but this actually states that basically instead of them stealing it, it was accidentally destroyed when they invaded. This explanation, like I said, is practical, but it's very unpopular in religious tradition, since the Ark was regarded as so holy that its destruction seems almost unthinkable. So you can imagine the religious people that believe in the holiness of the Ark, they are not going to admit that the Ark could be destroyed. So this theory is not very popular. For believers, the absence of any record of its destruction suggests that it was hidden rather than lost. So they basically go down the route of saying if the Ark was destroyed, it was so significant that someone would have written about it. And because there is no writing about the Ark's destruction, that must point in the other direction, meaning it was hidden. It's feasible, it makes sense. So this is not kind of like an explanation theory, this is more of a segue into kind of explaining the rationale as to why it's hidden and not destroyed. It doesn't actually shed any light on where it's hidden. But now, the last one, I believe this is the last theory I've got, is the Knights Templar. Now, the Knights Templar are a very, very powerful, they were a very powerful medieval Christian military order, which were founded in 1119 CE to protect pilgrims travelling to Jerusalem. The Knights Templar are kind of a group that you always hear about, and a lot of people don't actually know much about them. But they became wealthy and influential with strong ties to the Holy Land during the Crusades. So they were actually suppressed in the early 1300s by King Philip V of France, who accused the Knights Templar of heresy. So the story linking the Knights Templar to the Ark of the Covenant goes like this. So number 1, the discovery beneath the Temple Mount. When the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099 CE, the Templars established their headquarters in Al-Aqsa Mosque, believed to stand on the site of Solomon's Temple. Legend claims that the Templars excavated beneath the Temple Mount and uncovered sacred treasures, possibly including the Ark of the Covenant. Supporters point to the name Templar, the Temple of Solomon, as symbolic of this connection. According to the theory, the Templars secretly took the Ark into their custody to protect it from being lost or desecrated. It was supposedly transported from Jerusalem to Europe, perhaps hidden in France or even elsewhere. Some believe the Ark was moved to Chartres Cathedral in France, which was actually built by the Templars and full of mysterious symbolism. So if you ever get a chance, if you look up that cathedral and look at some of the symbolism inside the church, and then keep in mind it was built by the Knights Templar, there's some very, very, very weird connections in there. Another legend places it in the Rosalind Chapel in Scotland, which was also built by the descendants of the Knights Templar in the 15th century. These sites are often linked to esoteric secrets and relics in popular lore. So it's kind of, this is a very, very interesting one, and this one makes a lot of sense given the Knights Templars' rise to wealth and influence. It was meteoric, and if you got to imagine, if they found something like the Ark, forget the power of the Ark, let's just talk about the gold itself. The gold itself would be enough to catapult them into riches. Not thinking about the actual, if it was powerful, like they say it was, they would harness that power. And then the Knights Templar, like I said, are a very mysterious group, and they're actually linked to modern day Freemasons, because the Freemasons claim some spiritual lineage to the Templars. Conspiracies suggest that maybe some of the high Freemasons may still be hiding the Ark. Stories also tie the Ark to the Oak Island treasure in Nova Scotia, where some believe the Templars buried the relics. So now this Knights Templar story, like I said, it's very idealistic, it's very cool, but there's no real archaeological proof that the Templars ever found or even held the Ark. I don't know what sort of evidence there would be for that. I suppose it would only be writings, or it would have to be contemporary writing, I suppose. But most historians see the theories as myths, and that kind of grew and snowballed after the Templars' downfall, when they became surrounded by secrecy and legend. So it's kind of one of those things that they feel like after they died, then the legend became bigger than the Knights itself, if you know what I mean. Still, though, the story has, like I said, has inspired books, movies, treasure hunts, most famously, like I said, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So guys, that is the Ark of the Covenant. Like I said, a very, very intriguing object, intriguing relic. It's covered in all three Abrahamic religions. You know, it's obviously very, very big in the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, and even in the Islamic faith. They have their own little tradition about. So guys, that is the Ark of the Covenant. I hope you found that interesting. I certainly did. This is something that I've kind of looked at for a while, and even though I've kind of gone through all these theories, it doesn't really get me any further forward. I'm still kind of stuck between a couple of theories. The Knights Templar one is very, very intriguing to me. I like that. And I also like the one about it being buried under Al-Aqsa Mosque. Them two, for me, are they're the ones that I'm attracted to anyway, and they're kind of interlinked. So for me, I believe that either it's still under Al-Aqsa Mosque, buried somewhere deep, or that it was buried in Al-Aqsa Mosque and that the Knights Templar found it. So for me, that's what I think. Let me know what you guys think. And maybe, maybe the Ark's greatest power lies not in its existence, but in the questions it continues to raise. Because if you think, the Ark has kind of ignited so much conversation and so much debate between the religions, interfaith discussions, that in itself is a power and something to be commended. So guys, thank you for listening. Like always, this has been really interesting, really fun for me to do. And just before I go, I wanted to just give you a disclaimer that this podcast is not necessarily me spouting facts and claiming that everything I say is true, but I'm kind of treating this more like my personal journal, my personal research journal. So if I've said anything that's incorrect or that you think is false, please just get in contact with me and let me know. I'm happy to change my position if I'm presented with new evidence. This is not me trying to claim that I'm an all-knowing person. I'm definitely not. For the next episode, I have a few different ideas. I haven't decided on which one yet, but I was thinking maybe the Bermuda Triangle. Really intrigued by the Bermuda Triangle. So I was thinking that, or maybe the Loch Ness Monster. I've kind of wanted to go down maybe like a mythical figure type thing. Like maybe like talk about Wendigos, or Wendigos, however you want to say it, that sort of thing, potentially, or I might just stick to the Bermuda Triangle. But either way, I'll get them all done at some point. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. As always, get in contact with me. Like I said, if I've said anything wrong or that you don't agree with, I'm happy to debate with you or stand corrected. So yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.